So what I'm testing today is the pressure regulator off the common rail of a 2013 Jetta Sportwagen TDI. There it is. Isn't it a beauty? What a beautiful little thing there. Take a look at the car over here. So my car cached the high pressure fuel pump, totally corrupting the entire fuel system with little metal shards, and I'm trying to overcome that. Everything's cleaned out. A new high pressure fuel pump is in here, or actually a friend's used one, but there it is. The system still isn't working. Took the injectors apart, took everything apart, flushed everything, cleaned everything. It should be good to go. Still getting a code indicating a low pressure from the system. And I'm concerned that it might be the pressure regulator, because the purpose of the pressure regulator is to bleed off excessive pressure in the rail. Here's the rail. And if it is doing that too well, like being open all the time and bleeding it off, then the rail would never develop the pressure for the injectors. So that's my concern. Over on this side is the pressure sensor itself. So that information goes to the ECM, and it can tell the regulator to open up and release pressure if it gets too high. But if it's open all the time, then how could the rail maintain the very high pressure, 800 bar or so I think it is, thousands of PSI, that is needed to be maintained for proper operation? So this little regulator here has a tiny, tiny micro screen. Can't focus in here, I'm sure, but this very tip is a very fine mesh. I'm trying to focus on it, it's not doing it. Very finely meshed micro screen to keep particles from going in. But anyways, with this inserted into here, try to get some light on this. Into here. There it is. That seats all the way in the back, and it's sealed. So this part here is in the back, making a seal, so the fuel would be able to come into here, and then if it's open, it'll come out these little ports. There's 4 radial ports around this thing to bleed off some of the pressure. I'm thinking maybe if it's open all the time, it's bleeding off the pressure and never letting it build up. So I'm trying to test that. So that's the gig, and we got a couple of wires going here from a 9-volt battery. Notice that when I activate this, you hear that little click? The solenoid is clicking in there. So what we're going to do is see if the expected operation is happening. What I have is on my air compressor, I found the just right size tubing to fit on the regulator tip. And you can't just go on the shaft of the tip, because that's kind of basically sealing off all that little screen grid. So I'm going to go over the whole thing here. So there's an open space in there for the pressure to the air to go through the screen, and then out these holes. So I've got the regulator on my air compressor at about 50 psi. I tried doing this with my mouth and I can't tell anything. So 50 psi works pretty good. You can hear the air going through there. And all I'm going to do is, if I can do this with all myself, is activate. I got to hold on to this or it'll come off of here. So what I'm going to do is activate the pressure. And now activate the solenoid. Oh yeah, yep. So when it's active, when it has signal, the solenoid closes that passage. So my assumption is that normally there needs to be a hot signal on the connector here to close this. It's got to be normally closed, because if it was normally open, it would release the pressure. and the common rail wouldn't have the necessary pressure for operation. So it's got to be normally hot, and then when the pressure is too high, it would release that signal. That makes sense to me anyway. I don't see any other way that could work. But it appears as though my pressure regulator is actually functioning properly then. And that is the test I was trying to do. So once I reinstall this, I'm going to try and start the car again. It hasn't started yet. And make sure that that signal is hot, making sure that the regulator is not releasing pressure. And hopefully, I have my doubts that that's what the problem is, because the regulator seems fine and the car is relatively new with only 34,000 miles on it. But something is amiss, and I want to eliminate this possibility. Okay, so I put the pressure regulator back in, installed the common rail again, and I've broken out the connector here. The connector goes into here, and at the moment I just put in two wires and got alligator clips connected over, but I don't have it connected up. It's connected up when I take this and connect it over to this side. These other two clips here are going to my voltmeter. And the ignition switch is on and it's showing 9.2 volts, which makes sense. The ignition switch is on and the signal from the connector is a hot signal going to that connector, which we just saw will activate the solenoid and therefore prevent bleed off. So it's normally hot, which is what I suspected. Now, I find a very mysterious thing here. To actually connect this connector to here, I've already got the positive side connected up. That's the red. And the red over here. And if I connect the yellow yellow is negative. The other side of the connector at least. And if I connect it here, I will do that. I just did. You didn't hear it click. And the voltage drops down to basically nothing. 4.4 millivolts. And that's really mysterious. When I pull this off, you'll see the voltage go back up again. So it's not enough to drive the solenoid. It doesn't drive it. But that's the connector, those two connections that are on here. So I'm a little confused. If it's already got the hot signal on this side connected to the connector over here. So if I take this yellow, which is the negative side, if I just connect to the ground, sure enough, it's activating the solenoid. Making a spark there too. It's fairly high current maybe. And if you look at the voltage, it drops down to 8.6. Kind of makes sense for, I guess, for the load, but what doesn't make sense to me is why it works that way. I've got it grounded, but this connector is the only thing connected in here, and when I connect that up, it doesn't work. If I connect this to ground, it will, but to the negative side of the plug, no. It just drops it down. Maybe there's something different when the car is running that will actually enable that 9 volts to produce some current to drive the relay, the solenoid in there, I should say. But that's a little mysterious to me. But I did expect to see the 9 volts in any case, under normal conditions. Alright, well that's about it. I've got some questions still.